I sent away for a priceless gift, my family's necklace, passed down to each of the females entering our family. I was gonna finally ask Shintekwes for her devotion. Looking at it, I couldn't help but flutter my wings, thinking about the look on Shintekwes' face. I had been around her, next to her, since we were both hatchlings. We had grown up together, shared so much. I wanted to share the next 400 solar cycles with her. With my claws clicking on the floor, I was nearly doing what humans call skipping. After such a long time working on the far edges of territory, working with humans nonetheless, to save up enough to afford a wonderful ceremony and have enough for a large hive of our own, I just couldn't wait to see her again. With the box holding the necklace in my claws, I scurried all the way to her parents' hive from the spaceport. I was so excited. I didn't even wait for transport. Besides, I wanted to surprise her. Reaching her hive, I straightened up my antenna and adjusted my carapace a little bit before announcing myself. Her parents were grateful to see me and welcomed me into their hive. Yet I had the feeling something was off, something wasn't right. I just didn't know what. As my beloved entered the hive a few minutes later, I sprung up to try to embrace her. As I hurried into the next compartment towards the portal, I skidded to a stop as she was currently embracing a former Spurts Bowl player from our own juvenile education days. They embraced each other tightly, so much so that one could mistake them for lovers. Seeing me, Shinekwas greeted me friendly and was surprised to see me. She released the male she was with and greeted me with barely an embrace, which was odd. She then turned back to the male she was with and introduced me to him, but she introduced me as my best friend since I was freshly hatched. These words cut deep as I still clutched the box. I said, perhaps more than that. As I moved the box forward and lowered my head, a practiced motion drilled into me just like all the rest of my etiquette. She saw this and reached forward to open it. If she does, she accepts me. But as she reached out, the other male put his claws on hers and said something to the like of, you don't have to, and he is not good enough. Shintekwa's parents intervened and definitely interrupted with words of encouragement for her to open it. When he pulled her hands away, I broke etiquette and told him, it doesn't concern you. In that moment, all the time spent working, training, deal with hairless apes, and always acting in accordance with the society, what they told me. All those sacrifices, all that time I wanted to simply enjoy with my beloved, that I gave up as I saved up wealth to just have this moment interrupted by this thing pushing me to my limit. Seeing the hate in me, staring right into his eyes, he must have taken it as a challenge. He pushed her to the side and swung two of his claws at me. One struck the box, but I held onto it, not letting it go. He began to fight, but I would constantly try to protect the box. I lost due to that, though not before spraying some of his own blood on the walls and across Shintekwe's mother, which made her scream, of course. Her father was struck once in the struggle as he tried to get the mother away, and my beloved was pushed down again and again as she tried to intervene. All this, my beloved began yelling about how she will live her life her way, and no one controls me, not you, not him, anyone. My memory at this point is unfortunately a little bit fuzzy, but I remember her saying how she would never, ever marry a weak and broke male like me. This announcement that she gave broke my will to continue, and the box finally fell to the ground for the first time in unknown centuries. After the argument with her parents, the young female I thought I knew simply turned and left. Her parents helped me to my feet. Still having difficulty focusing, I see her mother pick up the box And in that moment, the box opened and the necklace fell out. Both her parents gasped at how decorative it was. I told them it is a family heirloom and I placed it carefully back in the box. I thanked them for their hospitality and left as I was getting blood all over their nice clean floor. For the next few days, the box never left my second set of arms. I limped to the closest establishment and began to ingest large quantities of ethyl alcohol. It was nearly a week before I was able to think straight enough to realize I'm back on my homeland, my homeworld. I had better get some new equipment and maybe get a job here. With my credentials and my nearly repaired body after a week, it should not be an issue. I was wrong. During my intoxication, that rotten chick Tina and her new mate had been busy using the social nets. They have claimed that I attacked them both, attacking her out of lust and attacking him due to his patronage, getting his parents' influence behind their lies. They have spread the word that no one is to employ me as I am unstable. Every time I'm able to find any kind of employment, a random communication is sent to my employer and I am thrown out, quite literally, without a single credit to my name. I did learn how to land in a way that it wouldn't injure me, though it still hurt. Eventually, my funds did run dry, and I had to find a way to survive. The nest with my parents and siblings had detached themselves from me as my sister's husband lost his employment a week after taking me in. What was I to do? I didn't want to return to the edge, but I had no choice. No other species would even look at my credentials more than once. A simple search of me would make them all believe that I was too high risk. Not the humans, though. To my surprise, when I returned, they all showed their teeth. Normally a threatening gesture anywhere else, but not with them. I knew what it meant. They then reached out and shook my claws with that strange motion they do. It was like they were expecting me to return. As we work, many would inquire about my well-being. I gave them the human answer without even looking at them. I'm fine. They would give each other a strange look, but say nothing. I fell into my routine of working, drinking, sleeping, maybe, working, drinking some more, working. And while it worked, it didn't actually help much. And I would still feel my life slipping away as I was in this, what the humans call a rut. I thought about the words I would be saying to my child, a child that would never be born now. My desire for life faded away as I received fewer and fewer messages back from home. One from my nephew stated how they had been harassed each time they sent a correspondence to me. My final message to him was simple. I thanked him for being the only one to be honest with me, telling the truth when no one else will. It was right around this time, as I was looking on the EarthNet, that I found an old human phrase from a philosopher, maybe? Something like that. They have strange words. Why would they call a philosopher a comic? The phrase was, I used to think the worst thing in life was to end up alone. It's not. The worst thing in life is ending up with people who make you feel alone. Wise words, I thought. I couldn't deal with it anymore. I had lost my planet, my home, my family, my mate that gave me my purpose in life. So, going into my roommate's bedchamber, I began looking for it. It had been here, I know. He always keeps it locked up, but it has to be here somewhere. He doesn't go anywhere without it. Ah, there it is. Using my claws, I broke the locking mechanism, opened the container, and I could see the darkened metal device in the one he called it by a number. Taking out this 1911, as he called it, I was worried at first, as it was very old. I didn't want to break it. Yet, it is very, very solid. It's just basically a chunk of metal. Remembering how I saw him operate it, I pushed the ammunition feeding device inside, hearing a click. Checking to assume that it had locked in, I was surprised. It was very solid. Then I remembered the mechanism he called a safety. I assumed that seeing the little bit of red meant that it would now operate. Humans do have this strange thing about the color red. I've been looking at this device for a few minutes now. I chuckle, thinking about how this will solve my family's problems. They can live free of the stigma from something I actually didn't even do. I won't have to face the pain anymore. Chuckling again, I thought, how this is how I make my maker? Staring down the barrel of a 45. Feeling a human hand on my shoulder, I suddenly see another land on the pistol. What the fuck do you think you're doing? The moment I raised my head and looked into his green eyes, I could see something that I never thought I would see again: compassion and understanding. Trying to pull the trigger, I quickly realized that one of his fingers is blocking the mechanism. I kept pulling until I feel warm fluid on my claws. The human, he's injuring himself to stop me from doing this. Why? Why are you stopping me? After pulling the weapon out of my claws violently and dismantling it without even looking at it, which is something humans are scary well efficient at, Bill sits down and talks to me. More specifically, he sat down and asked, "Okay, spill it. Why would you try to do something so stupid?" At that point, my emotions got the better of me as I began to tell him everything. He listened as I told him everything I had. I did everything. I did everything I was told. All the things I had to perform by society's standards, sacrifices so much for her, only to have her shove an energy saber into my heart, then stab me and my family in the back. I told him how I can't go back, how they reveled in my societal, financial, and mental destruction. They get some sort of sick thrill out of it. I told him I have nothing left, how life is nothing for me anymore. The accusations alone make it impossible to find another mate, which means no children, which means, what is there? I asked him. As the tears flowed for the first time, I felt so weak. It is very pathetic to show such things to others. Once I began to compose myself, Bill stood up and told me to follow him. On the way, he told me how a permanent solution to a temporary problem is just for beyond ridiculousness. He then said how we would go somewhere. I would feel better, and I figured it would be the bar. But I was very off as we walked right past it. Eventually, we entered the fitness area the humans call a gym. As we did, Bill waved to another human that came over. They spoke for a minute before I was introduced to the new human, Jose. As the proprietor of the establishment, he asked why I was in his establishment. Before I could answer, Bill said loudly, "His woman snuck a knife in his back, and he needs to get the right headspace before he does something really stupid." With this outburst, most of the humans stopped and looked at me. Then he spoke again. "He thinks he's alone in the universe with this. How many of you are here because of a woman?" With that, there was a mixture of limbs raising, whistles, and shouts echoing across the large area. Bill then turns to me with a slight grin on his face and says, "You see? You're not alone. Now, Jose's going to set you up with a regiment. And what I need from you is 3 weeks on this regiment. I know you have the discipline to do it." I asked, "Why 3 weeks?" He then responded, "Because the first week is hard. The second week is so much harder. But by the end of the third week, you can't argue with results. Now, if you need me, or any of us for that matter, do not hesitate to ask." Bill walked away, and Jose got some information before we began. Humans are right. Why do they always have to be right all the time? The first week had me off every single vice I had acquired, and every day I would arrive to move something heavy. The second week, every single craving came back and they became so much worse. I also found the thought of being betrayed aided my workout. Those in the gym said is the best place to release their rage, something the humans seem to have a lot of. They helped me channel it into something other than despair, because they said, always, it was even written on the wall, anger is more useful than despair. Near the end of the third week of this regiment they gave me, I did something strange. I started to molt. Normally, this only happens once every dozen cycles, but I had put on so much mass that my internals exceeded my carapace. It doesn't hurt when you molt, but after it happened, I noticed I looked and felt wonderful. It was been nearly 17 cycles since I left my home, and I no longer regret it. I only worry about what will happen as I return. My parents are not doing well, and I must go back. My bros realized I was having trouble and offered to escort me. I refused at first, but they insisted vehemently, saying, "Either you invite us or we just go anyway." Upon arrival into my town, my location, most did not recognize me, which is perfectly fine by me. What got their attention, though, were the very large humans with me. When we arrived in my parents' hive, it was a mess. When I asked them about what happened, it turns out that my former beloved and her mate had gotten the entire city to hate them because of me. As I was gone, they focused on my family as they didn't have me to damage anymore. As we discussed the matter, a familiar voice rung through the rooms. That male's voice that made my blood inside my carapace boil to the point I thought steam was going to come out. "Oh, what a shame. It looks like you've been invaded again." Turning into the main room past the walls, I could see him and his gaggle of miscreants. They looked shocked at me in my new form, then calmed down, remembered that they have numbers on their side. That was until the humans I call my brothers came into the room behind me. They stood with absolute hate in their eyes after asking, "Is that him?" And I simply did a human gesture called a nod. They stood and waited right there, not saying anything else. That cocky male seemed to have lost weight where it counts and gained much more weight in his bulbous abdomen. He still spoke with disdain about how he has my female and how he mates her every night. When I did what my brothers insisted, by staying stoic, it seemed to agitate him even more, eventually demanding I beg him for forgiveness or he will violate my mother again. Shocked, I turned and looked at her, as did the humans. The look on her face said it all, and before I could even turn back around to face him with all my anger, the humans charged. The guards he had stepped in the way, but they were the first ones to find out what human fury is all about, why we classify them as undignified animals. These humans that call themselves roughnecks dove into a fury of claws without a second thought except kill. I ran in to join the melee, As the group, the humans call a posse, ended up on the ground, dismantled, I ran after their ringleader. I would have called his name, but for the life of me, I couldn't remember. To me, he wasn't that important, but he was important enough for what I was going to do. He tried to run, but my human-based training made me much faster. Jumping on him in blind rage took over as I ripped out his eyes except for one, tore his limbs apart by breaking the joints just as the human showed me, and then forcibly removing his genital gland before shoving them inside his mouth and slamming his mandibles shut, forcing them to explode. Even the humans thought this was disgusting as they stood by going, ugh, but they did not stop me. When it was over, I returned home. The humans only asked me if I was all right, and the name of the male slowly bleeding out. I honestly didn't want to answer anything. Not long after this, a large transport arrived with an irate father of the male and my foreign beloved in tow. They had to go around the bodies that the humans unceremoniously threw out the doorway and landed in front, just far enough where they wouldn't get hit by a transport, but far enough where we didn't have to deal with the stench. She looked and was crying, but I felt nothing for her anymore. The father demanded to know what prompted the assault on his eldest son, leading to him being hospitalized, barely clinging to what little life he had left. Before I could even speak, Bill and my brothers interrupted, asking the father's name. He told them, claiming he was the vice prime minister. They asked what would happen if his crimes of his son were suddenly known. He seemed just as cocky as the little shit that got beat up, and simply said he would simply disavow his career, claim that he knew nothing of it, even though he knows all of it. Besides, his son was free to do what he wished as he was the son of. Before he even finished the sentence, the father didn't even get to finish. His communication device chimed. As he answered it, everyone could hear the Prime Minister quite literally screeching into his ears. I looked around and then saw Sam and Kelton on their devices. Turns out they were sending all the information across the social networks and to other species as well. This way, those species would know what type of creatures they were dealing with here. With far too much to deal with, the father just got back in his transport, dragging my former beloved. Ugh, it puts a bad taste in my mouth saying it now. And just left. The scandal that followed shook my species to the core, not only socially but financially as well. While this was going on, my family was migrated to another planet, a planet with a lot of humans. We now watch as the Vice Prime Minister's family is unable to find employment and cannot even travel out around without being harassed. My human friends call this karma. I just thank the universe that I am in such good shape that I actually attracted a younger and prettier mate than I would have had in the beginning of this whole debacle. My family is now safe and does not have to worry about much at all. I also get to watch those who betrayed me and the humans burn for it. Bill and the others had me out for dinner and brought up my lowest point. They then complimented how much better I am now. I did eventually ask why they cared so much. It turns out they've all felt this way and they don't want others to feel that way. So they want to, as they point, set you up for success. Then they reminded me of an old human phrase, one that they had mentioned many times in the past to keep me out from doing something really dumb. But it came to full view and I now understood. When all your enemies are doing their best to make you quit, live on out of spite. Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. I hope you enjoyed that story. Before you go, I'd like to send out a couple really big thank yous to a couple of my supporters. That would be to Ava and also to SS Demon. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I will see you on Wednesday for our weekly live streams. This is Syntax, ejecting.